This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. You know, I didn't plan to get political today, and I promise not to get political today. Coming from my first podcast in Southeast Asia, I'm currently in Thailand, and I believe the proper pronunciation of this beach community is Krabi. It's very nice. It is raining a little. I've got somewhat of a cold. I've been on way too many flights and making my adjustment, determining what my next stop will be. But I was thinking of that song, Fortunate Son by CCR, that John Fogerty wrote all those many years ago. I was at the top of a mountain in Chiang Mai, Thailand, the other day. I think it's called the Doi Sutep Temple, I believe. And we went a couple kilometers past it to the top to where this palace was. And it was closed. And we walked down this kind of embankment towards the edge of the mountain. And there was a little park that had been abandoned. And there was these stairs that went down. So we followed these stairs down, and we were probably, I'm guessing, about 6,000 feet straight up. And when you looked out over the scenery, this valley and these mountains and these trees. And I guess that's why I just thought of the Fortunate Son song from CCR. You know, there was a lot of conflict going on over here at one point in time. It's a pretty peaceful place these days. And I have to say, I'm very fond of the Thai people. I've really enjoyed their hospitality and everything that I've seen. The pollution's tough. I have to admit, the pollution is tough. I mean, when you're in a city and you say to yourself, I can't go jog because the smog is at eye level, that's tough. But beyond that, it's pretty cool. And I guess, when I see that, I get back to the point of standing on the edge of that cliff. When I see all this great trees and valleys and leaves and all these great fauna and plants, and you just say to yourself, wow, this was a conflict area, not necessarily Thailand, but very similar scenery to Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam. You just kind of scratch your head. You're like, wow, I'm glad that's all over, or at least I'm glad it's hopefully never to occur again, because it's a really peaceful, nice place. Definitely recommend taking the trek over and taking a peek for sure. It's only 8,100 miles from California. That's not that far. It's only about 20 hours airtime. Jump in. So other than that, it's been an interesting experience so far. I mean, not other than that. I was just thinking of that Fortunate Son song. But it's been an interesting experience. And I have truly enjoyed not paying attention to news in America. And I did look on some headline for the first time in a couple weeks, and I saw apparently the country was transfixed with a cop killer in California and the fact that Katy Perry's boobs were hanging out at the Grammys. And that's about the only thing that I know from the last 2 weeks. So I think it even goes to show you, even more so from a trend following perspective, the idea of noise, nonstop noise. And if you can walk away from it and get away from it, whether physically like I'm doing or mentally, if you're still stuck in the middle of it, literally just turn it off. It adds no value. It adds no value. All of those people that are putting noise into your home, and when I mean noise, I mean media, that could be financial media, regular news media, whatever, they're just trying to make a buck. That's their job. They're trying to make a buck. That's all they do. I mean, that's it, right? That's what they want. They want your money. They want your eyeballs. They want your ears. But from a trend following perspective, in my world, and what I try and get people to understand, it's all pointless. It is not needed. And along those lines of what's needed and not needed, I want to play something that I've found. Someone forwarded it to me, and it's called What Do Prices Know That You Don't? It's by a Duke professor, I believe, And he's talking about two farmers and the idea of using price discovery, relying on prices to make decisions, and not necessarily what you think is going to happen. Because that's the fundamental perspective. That's the mental masturbation of fundamentals, that you constantly have to be in a position of what is going to happen, and you don't know. But this video gets at that, not necessarily in a defense of trend following, but it's worth playing because I think you're going to see the lesson from a trend following perspective in this. It's about 4 minutes and 34 seconds long. I'm going to play it right now. I'll talk about it when it comes back.
What's better, knowing the price of something or knowing with perfect information how much something should cost? It's a trick question. Suppose there are two farmers, Al Truis and Mo Cash for Me. Each of them has 500 acres of land that could grow either corn or soybeans. Suppose I ask what their plans are. Both of them text back, I don't know. Now suppose we've borrowed a crystal ball from some genie and we know everything. Among the things the crystal ball can tell us are that Brazil has had a terrible summer with drought and then late floods that wiped out 40% of their soybean crop. It also tells us that new uses for soybean curd have pushed up consumer demand for soy paste all over Asia. Meanwhile, corn crop yields have hit record highs all over the world, and at the same time, several countries ended their corn-based ethanol programs, leading to an extraordinary corn surplus. Our first farmer, Al, has to decide what to plant. Al never wanted anything for himself. All he cares about was doing what was best for all of humanity. He does research, trying to decide which crop will be better for humanity as a whole. But it's hard for Al to determine what information is most relevant, because he doesn't trust price information, and the knowledge that he needs is too dispersed, too specific, and too hard to learn. Now, Al knows a lot, but still not enough. He's stuck at I don't know. So he makes a guess, plants corn. Al's put a tremendous amount of time and resources into his research instead of focusing on what he's good at, running a farm. As a result, he doesn't get much corn planted, has a hard time selling the corn he does produce. He has to sell for very little, and he ends up bankrupt. Let's look at Mo's experience. Since he cares only about profits, he focuses on prices. In early February, the price of corn futures falls sharply. But soy futures indicate that prices for soy delivered in August should be excellent. Why did this happen? Mo has no idea, and he couldn't possibly care less. Mo sells a large soy futures contract to lock in the high price and plant soy on every square inch of land that he owns. It's a selfish bet, one that'll make Mo a lot of money. Instead of trying to be an expert in all the disparate subjects he'd need to master, to have perfect information about the marketplace, he just focused time and resources on running his farm. And the only other information he used was prices. So he produced a lot of soybeans and did well for himself. Which of the two did the right thing, the better thing for society? What would the genie with the crystal ball have told us? The genie would have looked at the glut of corn and the shortage of soy that made it so valuable and told us what people need is more soy. But of course, there's no such thing as genies in the real world. Information is too dispersed, too complicated to solve the IDK problem through research. There's just too much to know. Fortunately, farmers don't need a crystal ball because prices do exactly what we were hoping that the genie would do. Farmers don't need to know why a price is high or low. And in fact, no single person could possibly explain it fully. But by growing the crop that produces the greater profit, farmers can produce the crop that solves the shortage, meets the demand, and satisfies the requirements of innovation. It's impossible to attain perfect information about the entire marketplace, which is changing all the time. Prices are a way of condensing all that information into one easily understood signal. Almost like magic.
What a great video, right? Too much information out there. He wasn't even coming at it from a trend following perspective directly. But too much information is your downfall. All this info doesn't do anything. If anything, it just clogs the mind. Fills the mind with all kinds of unnecessary blips and blops and all kinds of stuff that just clogs the arteries, so to speak. The brain just doesn't fire correctly. It's a mess. It's not needed. Of course, I might convince the true believers. I won't be able to convince the vast armies of people out there that want to believe that if they just watch one more episode of Bill O'Reilly, one more episode of Anderson Cooper, one more episode of somebody on MSNBC, just one more episode. And if they listen to one more politician, make a promise that everything will be okay. Just trust us. Just trust us. And you know what? Right now, it looks pretty good, doesn't it? All that trust. That trust looks pretty good till you start to realize it's a game.
Shall we play a game? Shall we play a game? Shall we play a game?
Don't you just love that old soundbite from the movie War Games? Shall we play a game? Shall we play a game? Well, that's what we're at right now. We're at a game. And if you're in a game, how do you navigate it? What do you do? What decisions do you make? And what's going to happen when the game doesn't go the way that the government has said? The government has said loudly and clearly that the game is on. Trust us. Low interest rates will raise the value of all assets, particularly stocks, to super high levels, and that will help you to dig out of all of your holes. And magically, stocks will just keep going up and up and up and up and up and up and up. Never stop. So the question is, what lies ahead? What lies ahead? I don't know what lies ahead, but I did catch a piece of writing from TransTrend, which has been a fairly successful trend-following trader for well over a decade. And they had a newsletter that came out, and I believe it was either January or February of 2013. Let me read a couple paragraphs from their perspective about what lies ahead and what you can expect. One thing is obvious. As long as central governments succeed in completely controlling markets, meaning that they manage to sustain the high peak by absorbing any undesired movement at all costs, then one cannot expect miracles from a trend-following strategy. No nice profits, but also no large losses. Patiently and consistently trying to limit losses. This is the name of the game for a trend follower in such an environment. We have certainly succeeded in this respect last year. TransTrend's downward deviation was noticeably smaller than the average during this period. And they have some explanation there, but I'm more interested in what they have to say about their view of government. They continue. But what if markets start to move away from the grip of governments? It does not take a great visionary to predict that at some point this will inevitably happen. We already stated, not all countries can stimulate their exports and their economy with a weak currency. Government debt cannot keep rising without any consequences. Effective yields cannot stay negative forever. Looking back in history, we see multiple ways out of such an impasse. They all have one common characteristic. They are accompanied by movement. If not with a carrot, then with a stick. What a great line, right? Accompanied by movement, if not with a carrot, then with a stick. Movement's going to happen, people. The article continues, not the article, this newsletter continues. The socially least desirable ways out are often the ones that are accompanied by the fattest tails. In dark days past, this might have meant tensions between countries spiraling out of control. We are confident that mankind has learned from this. Still, we signal in various countries so many different forms of emerging extremity that it would be an illusion to think that this can not erupt somehow, or that such an eruption would not have any impact on markets. The tail-proof risk management should then protect against an overly high impact on our portfolios, although we would expect to see larger swings than we've seen in the past year. The socially least undesirable way out of the high peak propped up by cheap money is probably the more or less road paved of inflation. Many a banker has been taught that inflation is a dirty word, but the burden to service piles of debt for a country in crisis becomes much more bearable when a large part erodes with inflation. And which country is currently not in crisis? ? If this turns out to be the road we travel down, then indeed this would also not be bad news for the trend-following investor. We trade numerous markets, including synthetic ones, with which we can directly or indirectly take advantage of inflation, at least as and when this trend presents itself. We await developments with patience and confidence. End quote. You just can't do anything, right? You can follow the price movements. You can't predict what these Looney Tunes governments are going to do. You have no earthly idea. But you have to have a strategy to take advantage of it all when it happens. One of my guys that I like to read is a fundamental trader. He could be a closet trend follower for all I know. To tack on to that trend segment, I want to read a little bit from John Hussman's most recent letter. He says, quote, "Nearly every New Year's Eve and 4th of July, you'll read news stories about boats that capsized, often with terrible consequences. Why? Everyone was so eager to watch the fireworks that they all piled along one side of the boat. At that point, even a modest shock, like the wake of another passing ship, became enough to flip the boat over. It's a predictable phenomenon. But tragically, people don't seem to learn from it." Well, you can see where John is going. He's going right to where trend was going, which is something will happen eventually. And the question becomes, are you prepared? Or do you just want to trust that the government can forever prop up whatever market you're most interested in, perhaps most likely stocks? Hussman continues, and he gets market specific, and I want to read a little bit more from him. He goes on, quote, "As a sign of how warped this celebration has become, Gordon Chang appeared on CNBC recently, noting the troubling difference between exports reported by China to other countries and imports reported by other countries from China, as well as the inconsistency between low cargo numbers and high reported export numbers. In response, the CNBC anchor said, and I'm not making this up, quote, "You know, Gordon, I agree with you, but let me take a different tact on this, all right? Let's say you believe that China's making up the numbers, but if the stock market there keeps going up because of it, and you believe the government will keep priming the numbers, isn't that sort of a reason to bet on the Chinese stock market?" End quote. That question is like encouraging people to invest with Bernie Madoff because he keeps putting up the numbers. The troubling similarity between the late 1990s bubble, the housing bubble, and the present central bank-induced advance is that the speculative nature of each was largely recognized, but people took the same attitude. Quote, "When the music stops in terms of liquidity, things will be complicated, but as long as the music is playing, you've got to get up and dance. We're still dancing." End quote. Those were the famous last words of Citigroup's former CEO, Chuck Prince, at the mid-2007 peak, just before the financial markets began to implode. Now, Hussman's interesting because he's making the comment that don't follow prices, which I disagree with. I think if the Chinese stock market is going up, you want to be long. The issue isn't what to do with the market when it's going up. You want to be long a rising market. That's not the issue. The issue is having an exit strategy. So be long a rising market and be happy about a rising market. Just have a freaking exit strategy. That's how you solve it. I mean, I think Hussman is correct that from his perspective, there's all these fundamental factors that show, just like trend is doing it more from a technical perspective, that the markets are at a fairly fragile place. And that one chink in the armor, so to speak, could send things tumbling. Is that a prediction? No. Do I know what's going to happen tomorrow? Absolutely no idea. I mean, crappy Thailand right now. Crappy, not crappy. I can't pronounce it right. So don't kick me in the butt for my bad pronunciation. But it doesn't make a difference. Just have a plan. Look, it's really easy. If you don't like all this stuff, if you don't like all this trend following stuff, then just be out of the markets then. Just get out of the markets completely. I talk to people all the time, but sometimes they can't wrap their arms around this trend following mindset, or they're just so new to the markets. It's just scary and they don't know where to go. So what I say, and this is very similar to what Hugh Hendry says, his belief is we're down to single digit years to where you won't have to be smart about investing or trading. You'll just have to be long, meaning he sees the mother of all crashes and you toddle in to buy stocks after a massive crash. That's my modified trend following view for those people out there that really don't want to think about it. So look, if you're going to approach the markets from a trading perspective, if you're going to get out there and you're going to swing it right now, you have to consider trend following. You have to consider it in your arsenal of tools. You have to understand it. You have to look at it. You have to absorb it. Maybe you don't use it. Maybe you don't like it. But to not know what it is, to not understand trend following, even if you're a fundamental trader, if you believe trend following is completely crap and you don't want anything to do with it, you still have to understand it. Because the performance data alone, and I was working on my presentation the other day I'm giving a presentation in Tokyo on February 25th for a brokerage firm, CLSA. And it's amazing when you look at the amount of data that supports trend following performance going back literally 10 decades. It's just phenomenal. It's just phenomenal, the amount of data. And if you are interested in a copy of one of my presentations, I probably will have some copy of a presentation that I can put out, or at least pieces of it. Drop me an email. It's not ready to be sent out yet, and you probably won't be able to get the whole thing, but I can give you some pieces. And just send me an email to Michael, Michael, at Covel, Covel.com. And I'll send you something along. Also, just one other quick announcement. It's taken a while, but I finally decided to put my Turtle book in audio format. And I think for those people that like audiobooks, they'll probably enjoy that. That should be out in the next couple weeks. And I will, now that I've gotten past my initial get used to Southeast Asia, the rest of Asia, I'm going to start doing quite a bit more podcasts. However, I'm going to start to do these more on the road. I'm going to get outside in some really weird locations. I don't know. Maybe I'll turn the video camera on too and do some video podcasts as well. But a lot of observations so far. I can't wait to see. It's been a few years since I've seen some of the financial centers, and I'm sure as I start this process of presenting and speaking, and the city list is looking like this of where I will be in the next few months in terms of presenting. I will be in Tokyo, Hong Kong, Singapore, all presenting. I'll be in KL presenting, Kuala Lumpur presenting. I will be in Beijing, Shanghai. I believe the proper pronunciation is Shenzhen, I believe. So all of those cities I will be presenting in. I will try to put a schedule online, so if people want to connect, maybe we can. My schedule is so, it's wide open, but it's also hectic. So it's going to be hit or miss. But I'm a big fan for all of you folks out there living over here in Asia. I'm a big fan of the culture, a big fan of the people. Everyone is super nice. I love the work spirit. I mean, everyone is working. Everyone is hustling. And I'm sure there's some places where people aren't hustling, but I haven't seen it yet. Everyone seems to be hustling. And that's great. You just love that attitude. And, my biggest thing that I've enjoyed so far, driving on the wrong side of the road. So in Chiang Mai, Thailand, northern Thailand, driving up mountains, driving down mountains, going through the city on the wrong side of the road, surrounded by motorbikes of teenage kids not wearing helmets, zipping in and out of you like crazy. Quite fun. They're so nice here in Thailand. The people are so nice. They drive like maniacs though. But even when they drive like maniacs, they're not mean about it. They don't really honk or, try and ram you on the tail. And what's interesting about the driving too is that if you want to move to the right, if you want to shift lanes, and there's really not, police and a lot of traffic regulations abided by. But if you want to shift lanes and there's traffic everywhere on either side of you, you just kind of slowly start to go to the right, for example, and everyone just kind of shifts around you. It's much different than America. If you're in massive traffic in America and you want to shift to the right, and there's someone right next to you, they're not going to move out of the way. They're just going to hit you to prove a point. That's kind of what America does. In Thailand, they just move out of the way, and it's like a swarm of almost like insects, and I'm not saying it in a derogatory way, where people just kind of move politely with the swarm as it's moving and no one hits each other. I just saw no accidents, even with all this very, very different driving that would cause most Americans' heart to race. I was as zen as possible just going through it. So quite interesting, quite fun. Very cool place. Can't wait to get to Tokyo here, though, in the next less than a week and get some really good sushi. So that is the first update, first new podcast from Thailand. And there will probably be at least one more before I leave Thailand. There will definitely be many in Tokyo as well. I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.